Welcome to the LivBtr podcast. I'm Erica Spiegelman, addiction and wellness specialist and author, and along with me, I have my co-host, Jay Siano, a New York-based serial entrepreneur, business scaling expert, and wellness aficionado. We are here to inspire, encourage growth, and most importantly, to live better. Hi, everybody. Today on the LivBtr podcast, we have Ben Tuff. He's a record-holding ultramarathon swimmer, and he's going to inspire us and educate us about his personal experience with addiction and how he got sober. He also has a movie coming out called Swim Tough: How I Swam My Way Out of the Bottle. We're so excited to have him with us today.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Erica Spiegelman.
And I'm Jay Siano.
And we are the LivBtr podcast. And today we have on a very special guest, Ben Tuff. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So among being an ultra-marathon swimmer and an advocate for a sober lifestyle, and you said that yourself, you are sober, we have an audience that is in so many different places in their wellness journey and trying to live better. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to live better and how it started and a little bit of background on who you are?
Yeah, so it's kind of ironic because my whole journey started when I was quite young, and I had massive anxiety. And that anxiety was often internalized by me in the way of hypochondria. I had every disease, every cancer, everything you can imagine growing up. And my parents are like, if you have one more of these panic attacks, I'm going to take you to the psychiatrist and you're going to have to get therapy. And I was like, oh no, like that's a really bad thing, I guess. I don't want that to happen, you know?
When you say when you were really young, like how old are we talking when this started?
So probably age 7, age 6.
Okay.
It was, and I remember I was in 2nd grade when I really remember it because my best friend was diagnosed with bladder cancer, and they said, we don't know if he's going to make it. And so I was like, well, what were your symptoms like? He was like, well, I felt like I had to go to the bathroom all the time, blah, blah, blah. Within a couple days, I had in my head bladder cancer. And I would take so many of these things and internalize it. And I was so high stressed, high strung, and I didn't have the outlets. I did have sports to a certain extent. And I also grew up with an identical twin brother. And while that was nice to have someone who I was always a roommate with and someone to talk to, it also created a little bit more stress with the identity piece, because especially as you get into the 13, 14, 15-year-old range, you are struggling with identity already. And you throw into the mix a person that looks exactly like you, who you're often mistaken for, and the competitions that's just created in a natural environment. It was a recipe for disaster. So I remember having a panic attack one night at the age of 13, coming downstairs, and it's like, Mom, gotta go to the hospital. I'm having a heart attack. And she goes into the other room and she comes back with a shot of vodka. And she said, just take this and go to bed. And I was like, okay. So, you know, I did what I was told. I was a good son and it worked. I was like, man, that's awesome. You know?
Oh, boy.
And it's not like it's something that like I did all the time, but that's something that will never be erased from my memory as my first experience, right? It was awful. Looking back at it, it was the worst seeds to be sown within me. And
Wow.
yeah,
That is a very interesting story. And it's interesting too, because I have twins in my family and I never thought about the identity, component of being an identical twin. That's fascinating. But needless to say, the vodka was the secret remedy to your anxiety. So you obviously went on to start drinking alcohol.
Yeah, I did make it a I thought was pretty far compared to most of my classmates. And it wasn't until I was 16 or 17 that I started to drink more heavily on the weekends, only beer. But my whole weekend revolved around it. I remember going in to my parents' fridge all week long and taking a beer each day, and taking maybe 2 another day, just to get ready for that weekend. Just so in my head, I knew I was all set. Like, okay, I don't have to worry about getting that out.
Totally.
We all did that. That's why we're here.
Yeah. And looking back at it, it was such an alcoholic mindset, and that continued. And I would say I was a relatively normal drinker, but the funny thing is once I got sober and I became the kind of designated driver, I looked in the beginning. I looked at my wife. I said, I think this is the first time that I've driven home from somewhere. Like, it was never me.
That experience is a lot more recent for me, so I feel you on that one. So how long ago was that for you?
That was almost exactly 11 years ago.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
I remember too, when I was 13, being given a glass of wine, not for anxiety, but just we were traveling, and my stepfather at the time, maybe I was 14, but I was a mature 14, and he was like, sip, you can have a little sip, and he was more of a European style of a person, and so, and I remember this warmth going down my chest. Really, I to this day I remember it, and I was like, wow, and I knew it was like, this I like, and that connection was formed. And yeah, the addiction and my own addiction with alcohol didn't really rear its ugly head till many years later, but that I think relationship with the alcohol did start to some degree, and I think that's what's really interesting is identifying, oh, this brings me peace, this brings me tranquility, this brings me relaxation, and it's just a knowing about it. And it's not necessarily like, boom, you're going to be an addict the next day, but it's making that connection, which is the most detrimental to our health.
Right. And I would say, I was a binge drinker up until 14 years ago, and hiding like some beers every now and then, like going out to the garage and drinking like 2 beers and then coming back in, and like little hiding things. But for the most part,
hiding from who?
From, my family mostly, even though I came from a family of very heavy drinkers.
Yeah.
But mostly my wife and anybody who I thought might judge me as to, oh, like, what are they doing? And that's why I was a teacher for 21 years, and it's so easy to surround yourself with partiers, and there's always something going on. There's always a group of teachers who are off one night who want to just take it all out, take out all the stress, party it out, and then be like, just work through it the next day. And
get out. More people, or that's funny.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of. I worked in the restaurant business as well. I would say it's quite similar.
Really?
It's work hard, play hard.
Wow.
I feel like it's almost, since alcohol is so acceptable, and the gateway for us, we're all sharing a very similar story. In your story, Ben, where you're saying you took it from your family's, liquor cabinet or refrigerator, it was only accessible because they drank like everybody else, drinks essentially. And it's only foreign to us now, really, that, you don't necessarily have to drink at every single event to have a quote unquote good time. Again, I'm just discovering this stuff more recently, which is why I'm so fascinated with the topic. But it's a shame that everybody really still to this day associates a good time with alcohol or drugs, and that you essentially need those to be part of the good time, or you're not having a good time.
Right. And I would say for me, about 14 years ago, I really started to self-medicate more with the alcohol piece, and for my anxieties and for when I was kind of depressed or down in the dumps, I'd be like, okay, this will lift me up. And also when I was just through the roof on a really warm 68-degree day, go out there, have a couple drinks, be excited about it, maybe do a little fishing and hang out. And that was what it was all about. And boy, did that go down quickly. And somehow I functioned doing like that behavior for a good 3 years or so. And I was really good at hiding it. I would go get groceries. I'd be always volunteer to get groceries. I would get cash back, so my wife would never see the receipts and see that I was buying beer or whatever. I'd put the money in the back of my wallet, and then the next day I'd sneak out of work or sneak out of teaching in my off period. I'd go to the liquor store. I'd buy a pint of vodka, the blue Smirnoff one, because it had the most alcohol. I didn't even care. And then I'd buy 2 vitamin waters. I'd sip them down to the label. I'd fill them both up. I'd throw away the Smirnoff thing. I'd put the vitamin waters in my backpack. And then in my mind, it was just vitamin water. It was my kind of daily medicine. And I'd have one of those each day. And just like when I was a kid, that stress would start to would come over me as soon as I started to think, oh, wait a minute, I'm out. Like, what do I do? I need to go back and figure out a way to get out there and do it all over again. Right. And so, yeah. I mean, it was awful. And then I just couldn't keep up with it anymore. And
what was rock bottom for you? Like, what was there an event that occurred?
So it was my 3rd trip to the ER in about a 4-month period for an anxiety attack. And my wife took me, and we were in the triage room with like the curtains where you go before you get admitted to the ER. And we were in there for like an hour and 45 minutes. And I said to the nurse, I said, what's going on? Like, are we going to go? Are you going to let us in and, let me see the doctor? And she said to me, not until your blood alcohol content becomes below the legal limit. I was like, okay, it's 11:30 in the almost afternoon. And I stopped drinking at 9 the morning previous. And my wife didn't really know I was drinking. Everything came slamming down.
Wait a minute. So this was at 11:30 a.m. that you're at the ER and you stopped drinking the previous day? Or the previous day. And your alcohol limit was still
above the legal limit. And eventually I asked the doctor, I was like, how is this possible? And he said, your liver function is so bad right now. The amount of alcohol you're putting into your body, you can't process anymore.
Wow.
So that was like the big warning sign right there. But
just out of curiosity, were you actually in your mind intoxicated at that moment?
Oh no, I was you were over.
Just hungover, yeah, but not at all feeling the positive, good vibes, of being intoxicated. That's unbelievable.
But I actually ended up going home and getting so sick and nauseous because I had been on at least a 2-week hardcore bender that I had to go back to the hospital again and get an IV. And
so when you would drink, I have so many questions about this. I'm fascinated. Yeah. So what you're saying, so you would drink from morning till night? Typically, you described 2 vitamin water bottles, which are not very big.
Right.
And that they would let you drink 1 a day, which is not that much alcohol.
So explain. If you chug 8 ounces of 100 proof vodka in 5-10 minutes, that's a pretty good jolt to the system. Right?
A very good jolt.
Yeah, so that's a good 10 units of alcohol. And then to cover it up, you drink 6 to 8 high velocity beers on top of that.
Okay.
It adds up, right?
So it's cumulative too, like if drinking every day, that doesn't really leave your system. Even if you give yourself a couple hours to sleep or detox or whatever you're trying to do, and you start again. I mean, it just doesn't matter. It's cumulative. It stays in your food for longer than we think.
My doctor described it as the shampoo effect. I was like, what are you talking about? He was like, you know how like people say if you wash your hair too much, it builds up? Well, the same thing with alcohol. If you drink many days in a row, it's a shampoo effect and it builds up, and it's going to eventually be very detrimental.
So I get anxiety after drinking, and this resonates with me tremendously because, when people talk about like getting rid of anxiety by drinking, it's like it's actually the opposite effect. Like for me, yeah, the anxiety might be gone while you're in the process of drinking, but after that, when you're coming down and you're hungover, that's when I would have the worst anxiety, and the only way to get out of the anxiety is to drink again.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's the cycle.
Yep.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, did swimming save your life? Tell us how swimming came into play. Let's hear about like the ship towards the light. Like, how did you get?
Yeah. So I ended up going to Silver Hill Hospital for rehab, and I ended up spending 5 weeks there. And one of the first people I met was a guy named Ken, and he was from Ireland, and he was always talking about doing these triathlons. And I was like, sweet, I want to try that. Like, I'm going to have so much time on my hand. I was like the most enthusiastic, happy drunk you have ever seen in rehab, and everyone hated me for that. And I also was diagnosed with bipolar. So it was nice to because it was the first time I actually saw a professional, and it was relieving to me to actually put a name on those feelings that I had and why I was feeling that way. So I ended up after Ken's advice of learning how to swim, I taught myself how to swim right after rehab, and it took me about 3 months, and I started doing triathlons, and I was super into triathlons for about 6 or 7 years until I got too competitive. And I just wanted to beat everyone out there, and it was getting away from the reason why I got in it for the first place, which was to kind of give back, to be healthy, and all those things. And that's when I said, okay, you know what? I'm halfway decent at this swimming thing. I might as well go for it. And I swam around Key West, which was 12.5 miles, and really good race. And then I swam around the island that I spend my summers on, Jamestown, Rhode Island, and that was 20 miles. And then I did a swim from Block Island to the mainland, which was about 19 miles. And the latest one, which a movie was made off of, was from Providence down to Jamestown, which was 23 miles. And it was unbelievable. I found that swimming freed my mind. I could spend time with my higher power. I could process things. I could let it all out there. And, this afternoon when I went to the pool, I came back just feeling so much more relaxed and happy.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, I think it's like what, Jay, we talk about a lot too. I feel like when I first got sober, running for me did that kind of like I felt like I was connected to, when I say spirit, my own relationship with myself improved. I was able to process emotionally, physically, all of it together. And I think it's great for all of us to share these stories, because not that anybody has to have the exact same, there's no one way in which people get healthy or change their lives, but it's good to know that, like, I think all of it has this component of connecting, like, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually in some way to something else, or to have something else that allows you to, like, touch upon those things. Would you say?
1,000,000% for me. If I'm not physical, first thing in the morning, I'm off. And that's been, really a big driving factor in me being able to, win every day. And a lot of the, our mutual friends, Erica and, just people in the wellness space where, I'm very entrenched. It's a very common theme. And, but Ben, I mean, swimming is very different than running or weightlifting, and then, as you're describing these plus or minus 20-mile swims, I'm thinking off Rhode Island and Block Island, like great whites. Like, I don't know how this is peaceful.
Yeah. Do you have anxiety around that?
Yeah, I have
So
anxiety
weird.
about
Yeah, and that's what's so funny is because I remember being a kid, from 6 until I don't know, like 15, being petrified of going to the ocean because the sharks were going to get me.
that. Yeah.
And then 2 years ago, I'm swimming from Block Island to the mainland through literally the #1 breeding ground of great white sharks in on the East Coast anyway.
Yeah.
And there were sharks under me, and they pinged 2 sharks over 15 feet just with the finder, and there was no question in my mind. It was their world, and if that's how I ended it, that's how it ended. And I was just happy to be out there. And one of the pieces that I talk about in the movie quite a bit is the support group that rallies around you. And to me, it's the same people who rallied around me during my most difficult time of my life as I found sobriety. It's just like that support group when I'm out there in the water and I'm relying on them to watch out for sharks. I'm relying on them to keep me fed, to keep me going.
Following you.
It's a team. It's, it takes a team around you to really help you achieve those things, which is amazing. But so tell us more about the movie. I'm very intrigued. How did that come about?
Yeah,
What's the name of the movie? What's the name of the movie? Yeah.
Yeah. So the name of the movie is Swim Tough: How I Swam My Way Out of a Bottle. And this came to be about 1.5 years ago. I was driving across the Everglades and I got a kind of random call by this guy named Matt Corliss. And he was like, "Hey, Ben, my name's Matt Corliss. I'm a producer and a videographer. And I do documentary, and I met your twin brother, and he was telling me how cool you are, and I wanted to just hear what your story is." And my twin brother had mentioned how I do just these crazy swims and hadn't really mentioned anything about the sobriety piece or anything like that. And Matt was like, after about a 45-minute phone call, he asked me, he said, "How do you feel about this?" I was like, "Well, I feel it's kind of cool, but I don't know why anyone would want to make a movie about me." He was like, "Well, guess what? We're making a movie, buddy." And then he ended up flying up to Vermont about 2 months later, and we started just getting rocking and rolling, and it was sort of a natural process because I had a big swim planned for the summer, and he would be there for the whole week and following along. And while he was doing that, he was also capturing my story of how I found sobriety and how these swims kind of mirror my struggles in sobriety, because I think that's one of the reasons why I continue to do these crazy swims, is because it's pushing me to my absolute limit. And it reminds me that nothing can ever be as difficult as what I already accomplished. And in the back of my mind, when it really starts to be really sucky, I tell myself, you can do this. Think about everything that you've overcome in your life already.
Yeah.
And so how often do you train currently? Like how much are you swimming leading up to a big swim?
So, I'm probably doing 12 to 15 miles a week, but I don't have any like big swims. I have, I think, a 10-mile swim in September. I'm kind of taking the summer off because it's going to be it's just going to be crazy with the movie, and I'm going to be all over the place. So I'm still kind of seeing what that next big swim is going to be.
Is it similar though to like actual like running marathon training where you're leading up to it, you're swimming longer periods to lead up to that big swim, or similar?
Yeah, so I was swimming about 40 miles a week leading up to the big swim.
That's a lot.
And how long is the longest swim like leading up to it?
It's usually about 60 to 70%. So it's very similar to
Marathon.
marathon.
Yeah.
Same sort of idea. And I'm kind of lucky in that I've had the same coach, and he knows exactly how I peak, when I peak, and knows when to kind of push me. And I'm actually a little lower on volume before some of my big swims than most swimmers are, because I can just step it up on the day of the swim.
So I need to know, from that moment in the emergency room where your wife learned that you were drinking, and that's where everything kind of fell apart. Tell us about that process and where you are in your family and your marriage today.
Oh yeah. And it was just after that. And that was just like a shock. And I was like, okay, well, I know I have to go and get help and go to rehab, because if I don't, I will lose my family. And my wife made that very much known. And it was like 3 days into my time at Silver Hill, and she called me and I said, oh, I'm doing so great. Like, I'm like kicking butt. I got a new sponsor named Ken. Like, this is so cool. And she was like, well, guess what? Things are really good here too. And I'm like, oh, what do you mean? It's like, well, your son, Wyatt, he's not as crazy as he used to be. He's calmed down. He's not being as anxious. He's not being as unpredictable. And that's because you're not here. And, that was like a gunk. And I started crying, and I didn't know what to say to that, but that's exactly what I needed to hear at that exact time, because as I kind of coach people through these same situations, and they question whether they should kind of come back a little bit. And I said, you have to just be honest and open. Yeah. And here I am, we just built a house up in Vermont basically in the backyard of where my wife grew up. And I have a 16-year-old and a almost 14-year-old, and neither of them can remember when I drank. Right. It's not even in their memory anymore. I think my son said, I remember going to that really fancy rehab place, and I said to myself, like, I wish I could go here.
And how do you think, based on all of that, how do you think that affects them? Because a big part of me stopping drinking and, looking at my relationship with alcohol is my kids. And they're 11 and 8 now. So they saw me definitely drinking, up until, like I said, recently. And, how do you think that will impact your children? Any indication?
Drinking or their own?
Yeah. Like, is it like, do you think that they'll go through the same stuff we did on some level? Or is it like, well, my dad, obviously went through this, and, I'm scared of that stuff. Like, how do you think that?
I mean, I'm so fortunate in that I have 21 years of working with middle and upper schoolers, and have learned how to talk to them about drugs and alcohol and vapes and all those things. And some things work and some things don't. And
any tips for the audience who do not have that background?
So, for my son, for example, who's about to get his license and be free a little bit, he is very cautious, because he knows that his genetic makeup is going to make him that much more likely to have an issue with drugs and alcohol.
Talk about that?
Yes.
To have a genetic disposition.
Yes.
Daddy did too, about that, right?
Yes. I was like, this doesn't come from me.
Yeah, but talk. Yeah.
Yeah. And an open, honest talk. I think that the biggest mistakes that parents make is they get very preachy. And especially for those of us who just want to do everything possible to dissuade our children from trying any of this stuff, we're going to kind of demonize them and make them these horrible things. And instead of doing that, I find that just laying out the boundaries and the consequences of what happens if you do, in the same way that I knew that if in early sobriety, if I screwed up, if I slipped, I would no longer be living in my house with my family anymore. that was a very strict line.
Right.
And, in Vermont, for example, parents have complete control over their children's license until the age of 18. So I can send an email and have my son's license revoked until he's 18 in seconds.
That's unbelievable.
Right? And another law that they have is that anybody who gets a minor in possession automatically loses their license until 18. So that in itself is it worth it? And in the end, I think now that especially my son has seen me go and rescue so many of my former students and have helped. I just took one out to Phoenix, Arizona last week because he was in rehab and he was just needs a little bit more time finding his way. And he hears my phone calls with him and he's like, wow, like that's nuts. Like that, I don't want that. Yeah. And the one complaint he had about his high school, he's like, Dad, like I think everybody drinks, vapes, or smokes pot. And I was like, well, that's just high school in general. You just got to surround yourself with the positive, powerful people that don't do those things, and then you're going to be okay.
That's a good sign that he tells you that too. I never mentioned that anyone did anything because I didn't want them to think anyone did anything. But those are all good signs. And I think with Jay too, I think I always say this to Jay, it's like it's role modeling for children to see that their parents are human, they're fallible, they made mistakes, they make mistakes, we own up to them, we take responsibility, we share how this has impacted them. It's such a beautiful thing. And I definitely think if your children are going to go on the right path, that's going to be part of it, is just having a parent that, mirrors what it is to be a healthy human being.
And there will be mistakes.
Yeah, right.
We're all human, for sure.
So what do you do now, Ben, day to day? You keep mentioning that you're helping people. So you're not working as a teacher. What is your...
So I've been working on my movie, and I'm going down to University of Georgia this week, and I'll be talking to some fraternities down there about my experience. And then I'll be going down to Atlanta and then South Georgia to St. Simon's to speak at some high schools about my experience and about how I found swimming and sobriety, because my goal is I'm focusing on the schools because I want to destigmatize this idea that addiction is such a horrible thing. Because if there's one thing that's holding our kids back from getting help for themselves or for getting help for another one of their friends, it's because they're worried about this kind of marginalization and being kind of pigeonholed into this area. And if with just a few of them, if I can inspire a few of them to be like, wow, that guy's kind of cool, like, and he's sober and he's proud of it, like, what the heck? Then I've done the right thing. And in my mind, this has worked because I've now taken 4 of my previous students to get treatment because, the parents either can't do it or just don't know how to deal with it. So they call me and they're like, Ben, like, we know you've done this before. We hear you talking about it all the time. Can you help us out? And of course, I'll do whatever.
When does the movie come out?
So we're set for about 3 weeks from now.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it's been
like film festivals, or is it going to be out at a certain network, or are you like shopping around? What is it?
Yeah. So the way this is all new to me, this movie thing, and I'm kind of figuring it out, but I will be going to film festivals this late spring, summer. And it's at that point that it will be picked up by a distributor or a Netflix or a Amazon, something like that.
Whoa, this is exciting.
So it's fun.
Yeah. Well, if you come to LA, let me know. And did you go to New York? Jay's there.
Please.
Yeah, definitely.
We gotta come out and support, do whatever we can.
No, for sure. any excuse. Well, I go down to New York quite often, or I used to. And then LA is one of my favorites. So
Likewise.
Yeah, that's awesome. Ben, thank you so much for being with us, number one. And you are an incredible inspiration. And, I know so many people in our audience are going to be able to connect with your story. Can you just tell everybody, if you have one little parcel of your favorite self-care tool that you kind of live by, or a tip or anything morsel for our audience to leave us with today?
So one of the one of the greatest opportunities I've had is I've been a speaker to a lot of sober executives or sober groups of people who have many years in sobriety but are kind of stuck in a rut. And I guess this is a common thing. I'm only 11 years in, and I'm so excited to be sober that it hasn't affected me yet. But I guess there's this kind of lull that a lot of people hit. And one of the pieces that I love to inspire people to do is to try something new in their life, and to take on something. It doesn't matter if it's knitting. It doesn't matter if it's drawing cartoons, if it's swimming, if it's doing a triathlon. Do something for yourself and do something for others, because that's the piece that keeps us going. And eventually you'll find, whether you start out as halfway decent or not, you'll find that with time and with dedication, you will find success.
Great advice.
Great advice. Yeah. Thank you, Ben. Thank you so much for being on with us today. And could tell everybody where they could find you if anyone has questions, or they want to start following you in the movie, or they want to, get in touch.
Yeah. So my Instagram is at ben.tuff, Tuff. And feel free to reach out with any questions at bentuff@gmail.com. And my website will be up in the next week or so, and that's swimtuff.com.
Amazing. Gonna give you a follow right now so I could follow along.
All right.
That's great. Well, we appreciate you so much, and we're honored you came on. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ben. Congrats on your journey, and it's exciting to meet you 3 weeks before the big movie premiere. So
yeah, and I will be down in New York for one of those festivals down there, so I will let you know.
Yeah,
hopefully out to LA.
Yeah, exactly. Let me know both, because I need to get back to LA.
Sounds good.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.